Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News Channel. With me, I now have Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, and Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner and national development advocate. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on This Day Live this week. Quickly, we have had three guests. We had Carl Bostic, reporting from Tel Aviv, Israel, on the killings of about 274 persons, 400 injured, because of the operation by the Israeli Defense Forces, who managed to rescue 4 hostages. And then the international response to that and the implications, and whether or not Israel truly has an army that has moral integrity. And then we had on minimum wage, this back and forth between government and organized labor, and the disagreements in the tripartite committee set up for that purpose. We had Dr. Muda Yusuf, the director of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. And then, of course, yesterday, Nigeria drew with Bafana Bafana of South Africa in a major must-win match. And tomorrow, we'll be facing the Republic of Benin national team in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. And we are number 5 in Group C. Far behind Lesotho, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And we keep wondering, well, what happens tomorrow? If we lose tomorrow, well, maybe we should forget about going to the World Cup. Let me start with you, Professor Aworawo.
I will just go in the same order. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the conflict in Gaza. It is unfortunate, and this is what we have talked about several times before now, that diplomatic resolution to this conflict is desirable, and that the way Israel has gone about conducting this, responding to the October 7 hostage-taking and terrorist attack is not the way what it should be. There are standards in fighting terrorism, and Israel hasn't gone that way in fighting, responding to the Hamas attack of October 7th. A whole lot of things are revealed. I mean, people have rightly described what has happened as a massacre. 274. Israel say around 100. Even if you say 100, to rescue 4 is a tragedy of immense proportion. The unfolding event should, if anything, serve as a catalyst for rapid diplomatic engagement, constructive engagement that would, bring this conflict to an end. It's a war that can be fought and everybody goes away, maybe live to fight another day, as they say. It's not a war that certainly Israel would win in one fell swoop. We've said it over and over again. So it's unfortunate, but the other side to it is the ethical issue and reputation. The ICC, the Human Rights Commission, the United Nations Security Council, all international bodies at different levels have condemned the way Israel has gone about, prosecuting this war, and called for restraint. But Israel seems to have been defiant, and the U.S. too is culpable because the analysis reveals that without the unflinching U.S. support, forget about all those noise that the U.S. president makes once in a while and the Secretary of State. They say that today and say, oh, Israel, we don't agree with this. And the next day they are giving all the arms, giving all the support and all that. So, like people have said, all those countries that have given that unflinching support to Israel, despite the atrocities being committed, are all culpable. So somebody said Germany is aiding genocide in Gaza. It's not too far from it when you look at the way these things have unfolded. But moving forward, one would imagine that with what happened just yesterday, He should ginger all those involved to pay attention to consolidate engagement to bring this conflict to an end. And let us see what happens after this. Hopefully, it will create the condition for the two-state solution, which we know is the only viable option. Those who analyze conflict, Gatung, Botin, Edo Dazar, and us, know that resolving conflicts that you have to go to some extent to address the root causes, which is why the two-state solution is fundamental to resolving this conflict finally. But let's hope that something positive would the energies will be directed to something more positive to bring this conflict to an end. As for labor, it seems to me that the government is adopting brinkmanship approach in the negotiation. And they said the president said something is disposed to something above 60,000. And just 62. In fact, when he said 60,000, somehow curiously I was saying, well, what if they say 60,100 naira is above 60,000? I was just, joking along that line. And it was not too different from that. I mean, come on. The government should have offered something a lot higher so that the negotiations will not be so tedious, like the palaver that the British and the Niger Delta leaders used to have in those days during the colonial period. Because when they 62,000 and those ones say, okay, 250,000, the gap is wide. Where is the meeting point? I was expecting the government to offer something a lot higher. And personally, I want to advise the president. I like him as a person. He should not allow people to, because the Labour said it was in his honor, that in his honor that he said he was disposed to something above 60,000. That he still let us sign. The thing was opaque, nebulous. It was not definitive. And good faith that the president said it was disposed to something above 60,000. And so we would not have expected that it would now be 62,000. It's like, okay, we say 6,000, we say 62,000, let us take it from there. And of course, the governors too, if the presidency is saying that the governors are now getting more money arising from the increased allocations generally that they share, they should be able to, pay more. Edo is already paying 70,000. So why would the other governors say 60,000 they can't pay? Edo on his own, without prodding, without any, people sometimes abuse of basic, but he's already paying 70,000. And they are saying they can't pay 60,000. And on that basis, the government is trying to look for some middle position. I would imagine that to prevent this constant disruption and the economic implications of all the disruptions, when the negotiations commence tomorrow, there should be something more positive. They should forget about the 62,000 they talked about, because of course Labour is saying 250 or thereabouts, so that we can end this. Otherwise, this thing might just drag on for the entire 4 years of this administration. If they go this 1 naira on top, the other one will remove 1 naira from the other side and back and forth. I mean, we should be more mature than that. There should be greater maturity in addressing this issue. Arrive at something that is reasonable, that can be paid, and something that also can be something close to a living wage, so we can move forward. Sports, I agree almost entirely with Aaron's submission. What to add is that the coach needs to instill greater discipline beyond commitment. Because, some of the players, the age gap is not so wide. He's not an old man, so to speak. We heard of people who came around who were not going to camp and all that. He should stamp his authority. Stamp his authority on the team. He should be kind. He shouldn't be harsh, but he shouldn't allow things to break down. Because if players are not disciplined and others see it, those who otherwise have been disciplined will also follow, take a cue from those. We just need to do that. He also needs to focus on, beyond that, some tactics. Nigeria hardly scores from set pieces these days. What are the players doing that they can't practice and score from set pieces? There are teams that set pieces just give them victory. And of course, we have many players, but the coach also should continue to look out for, very creative, more creative players who will be able to add flair to the team, such that, small mistakes, that's where goals come from. So I would say it should be Ancelotti-like, in some sense. Not allowing, it should be firm, but of course, it should also not go to the extreme, such that the team will be able to do well. The psychologists should let them know that the tomorrow's match must be a must win, and that commitment should be there. One reason why people were abusing Iwobi in the last Nations Cup final, they collect ball from you, you don't run after the person who has collected ball, as if it means nothing. If they collect ball from you, pursue the person, you harass him, you will make mistakes. We don't have that much in the team, which is where Osimhen, that energy, that grit, that ability to give everything. The team needs to have, be told to do this. If they do this, I'm sure they'll beat. It won't be a narrow 1-0, 2-1. They can even beat Benin 3-0. Forget about what the coach, former coach, that's Roy, is saying. He talks a lot. In fact, he talks more about Nigerian team than even his Benin Republic team, incidentally. Every time he's talking, his Nigerian team is giving advice and all that. It doesn't really matter. It's the players that will determine what happens on the pitch. If these things are done, if a win, Nigeria gets a win tomorrow, that would, open the door again for Nigeria to just coast on to qualify.
Well, Jide Ologun.
I quite agree with that. And we should realize that the teams that have come, they've all come to win. And what is said is that you go for goal. And when you talk about going for goals, we need that the team members should all have leadership spirit, you see, and put in their best to ensure that they win for the nation. And we expect that inspiration will be there. We don't want situations where the team members are there and what should be released to them to inspire them is held back. And like you said, we may be far behind, but with determination, we can perform excellently. And I think that will boost the morale of Nigeria at this point in time. But as it is said about strategy is a long-term plan for success. And someone said, if you want your dream to come true, you don't go to bed. So we expect that the coach will do everything to ensure that he put the best foot forward to win, and it shall be celebrated. And that brings us to this labor issue. And personally, I do not think we are ready to address this issue. Finally, if you go back in history, the first time we had a major industrial action was mid-1945, in the days of Pa Michael Umodu, and it was to press home
living allowance.
Exactly, good welfare for the workers. And I think the foundation of labor relationship in Nigeria is that of master-servant relationship. And we have not been able to bring it to the collaborative platform to activate productivity. And that is why I will be referring the federal government and the stakeholders to what we have in Section 16, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, that says that the state must provide reasonable living minimum wage. We've gone beyond minimum wage right now. If you look at the inflation in Nigeria, even the statutory 30,000 naira cannot cook a decent pot of soup for the family. And when Ajero was proposing...
It depends on what you put inside that pot of soup.
Doctor, sometimes when you go, as a researcher, we go testing these things. There are some stew that are no longer like mama stew anymore. So watery. In fact, and this is confirmed, right now you have about 5 pieces of tomato for about 1,000 naira in some locations in Lagos. You see, so Ajero is saying, we are talking about a family of about 6, a husband, wife, and 4 children. And statutorily, the 30,000 naira is the minimum wage, since it was increased from 18,000 of 2011. And even if Edo State is paying 70,000 naira, what's the pump price of petroleum? We are not even talking about minimum wage alone. We are also talking about the energy tariff. So you find that that space is choked. And let me bring this to the public relations angles. Now government is negotiating between 60, 62 or 100. The governors are saying, no, don't even bring in the issue of 70 or whatever. And the salaries and the allowances and the benefits of judicial officers is being increased by about 300%. So you need to look at how you manage all this. You see, so how are you going to make the workforce realize that we have your interests? And like Prof rightly mentioned, when subsidy was removed, more revenue came into the coffers of the government. State government got more allocation. So how are we prioritizing? Because if you go to the circle of the International Labour Organization, it's about having justice and fairness in the work environment. So how do we resolve this now? And again, I just realized how vulnerable the economy of Nigeria is when Labour, during the last major intervention, shut down the national grid. I mean, we've not sat back to look at the implications of that on the system we call the Nigerian government. That means we can just be paralyzed just like that. So we need to design templates to cope with this external shock. And we are talking about the private sector, the states must come in. What is the ease of doing business in Nigeria? What is the cost of doing business in Nigeria? Even in the private sector, how many players are still actively involved in production? And we need to look at all this. And then from what the Labour has put forward, 494,000 naira, I don't see the government
down to 250.
Exactly. Even that 250. Let's look at the economy again at the macro level. I think the population of those who are within the minimum wage bracket is about 1.2 million out of about over 200 million. So let's assume the government pushes that and say we are going to pay you. What about others that you need to adjust to key into what they earn also? How do you manage the viral impact in the marketplace? Because the market woman does not know whether Jide Ologun works for a federal government or is in the private sector. The news is that, oh, they have increased. So we need to look at the economy of this country and see how we can reactivate the economy. And I have a suggestion. It's in our constitution, the same section 16, that the economy of the nation should be managed in a way that we have a self-reliant economy, that wealth is not concentrated in the hands of a few, and that we provide opportunities. It's all about prosperity. When Adam Smith was writing The Wealth of Nations in 1776, it was about wealth. You see, so how do we deal with the poverty in the land? How do we ensure that we have industrial harmony, that people are productive? How do we ensure that by providing living wage, we tame corruption? Because Section 15, subsection 5 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999, as amended, says that the state shall abolish corrupt practices and abuse of office. And so with what we have now as minimum wage, how are we going to deal with that? And that's why it's difficult, for instance, when you are dealing with some government agencies, maybe you have some documents you have filed. Your file may not show up. You want to apply for your NIN. It may take you like 13 months before it should. So these are issues we must consider and ensure that we come together to position this country that is so blessed in terms of resources on the path of prosperity that will benefit everyone. And I'm suggesting the government can look at Mauritius, look at Botswana, and some other countries that have succeeded in balancing the scale of carrying the workforce across. And of course, I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, so for further consultations within the stakeholders on how to manage it, because what is playing out now is like the federal government is the giant. And the reflection that the economy cannot sustain what you are demanding is not showing within the circle of the giants. They still live flamboyantly and luxuriously. And the workers cannot just understand that we are the same within the same economy. And talking about Israel, I've monitored that conflict, and with the military prowess of Israel, Israel is a nation that wants to fight it out once and for all. And I mean, somebody was saying today that the hostages as they were rescued. And Israel is saying, with fire in the building and fire on the way out, they've been able to rescue some of the hostages. They still have some there. And going back to how Hamas just woke up and invaded Israel, I think Israel, while disrespecting stakeholders on observing the ethics of engagement in warfare like this, is saying enough is enough. And I believe that at the end of the day, they all have to come to non-kinetic engagement, diplomatic engagement. And again, talking about the superpowers that are expected to be the police of the world in terms of having honorable engagements, how instrumental are they? When you look under the backstage and see what role some nations are playing, then it may appear that maybe at a point in time, Israel will have to sit down with Palestine and say, okay, where do we go from here? But I believe that right now, Israel is not willing to back out to say, okay, let's go all the whole. And we just hope that the parties in the battle will listen to the voice of decency, particularly when it comes to international diplomacy.
Okay, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they trial 51 individuals, including 3 Americans, accused of attempting to overthrow the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo last month, has begun. The hearing is being broadcast live on national TV and radio from Ndolo military prison in the capital, Kinshasa. The defendants were ushered into the military court wearing blue and yellow shirts, making their first appearance in public since the failed coup. Arrested during the attacks on the presidential palace and the home of an ally of President Felix Tshisekedi, they face multiple charges, including financing terrorism, murder, and attempted assassination. The suspects have not yet been asked to plead in the case, which is being held under a marquee in the grounds of the jail. The U.S. State Department says it has not been given access to its citizens in custody. Now, Jide Ologun, let me come back to you. Last month, we had that attempted coup, which failed. Now the trial has begun. American citizens are involved. I think a couple of British citizens, then a Belgian involved in this. Last December, there was an election in DRC, which was won by President Tshisekedi with about 78% for a second term. But then there's also the big issue of the crisis in the eastern flank of Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, very rich country, vast mineral resources, but the people are in poverty. And then the latest is this failed attempt to remove Tshisekedi from office. What do you think?
It's quite unfortunate. And if you look at the precedents in Africa, talking about coup d'etat, you know, it's not likely that these people who are under trial may find a way of escape. Though we have some who succeeded. We talk about what happened in Niger Republic. And then when they come up, I expect that they will plead not guilty and the prosecution will continue. But like I said, I'm of the opinion that they may not find it easy. And talking about the poverty you have in that region, despite the massive wealth of oil and other resources we have there, some have argued that the former colonialists are still manipulating them. But the big question I ask in Africa is that for how long will you allow your mind to be held back by those who came primarily to exploit you? I did a research, 40% of the total resources in the world are domiciled in Africa. And Africa is just about 1.5 billion out of the about 8 billion people that we have in the world. So we continue to blame. You see, so you find, you know, regions that are rich in resources, but very poor, if not bankrupt, in resourceful engagement of their resources. And of course, you may not be able to run away from crisis in such regions. We still have the case of Burkina Faso and some of them that are changing the narrative within the African landscape. And generally speaking, And I hold that opinion. My big question is that whether you're talking about AU or ECOWAS, can we design a mechanism that will make leaders to be accountable to the people and bring prosperity so that we stop having all these unnecessary interventions if indeed we want to run on the scale of democracy? But we are monitoring the trial, but like I said, going by precedent, even coming back to Nigeria, how a coup marchers are treated, particularly when there's a sitting president who calls the shot, even though there may be separation of powers. But we are monitoring to see how it goes. But definitely, the law must have its way. So it's all about how good their defenders are.
Professor Aworawo?
Well, it is unfortunate. It's a tragedy that after 6 decades, after 60 years of independence, beginning 1960, where the DR Congo started with violence, you have the conflict between Moise Sombe, Kasavubu, and then Patrice Lumumba, and the international involvement in that conflict. And it has gone on with almost unpunctuated regularity since then. The country has been in conflict, in crisis and violence. A country that is blessed with, resources, mineral resources, extensive, and incidentally, the part of the country that the eastern part, where the troubled eastern part, is where we have the concentration of those minerals, which establishes the fact that desire to mine mineral illegally is one of the propelling factors for the conflict in the country. But as far as this current coup is concerned, Christian Malanga, who led the coup, is a foolish man. How can you think that you pick some boys from the streets of Atlanta and just bring them, buy some guns for them, and they'll be able to overpower the powerful army of DR Congo and just overthrow the government, and then you become the head of state of the country? So foolish. Incidentally, he was killed. He was resisting arrest and he was killed. His son, 21-year-old Marcel Malanga, is among those being tried now. Incidentally, it is not a phantom coup from what we have seen. Sometimes when some leaders want to eliminate their opponents, they will just say there was a coup and then roping people to put. But from what we have seen in this one, it's not a phantom coup. These guys left the US, came to DR Congo, armed people here and there to try to overthrow the government, and there was another set of people in the speaker's house who is an ally of Felix Tshisekedi. Unfortunately for them, across Africa, just like Barrister has said, the punishment for coup, attempted coup, is execution. It's capital punishment. I don't know how they will escape because everything seems glaring. But my advice for the Congolese government, so as not to attract negative backlash, is it should be fair. They are broadcasting the thing live, which is good. They should handle them. They should not presume that they are guilty until they are found guilty. They should assume that they are innocent, treat them fairly, treat them decently, and let the law take its course. But for them, the 51 people, I don't know how many of them will be acquitted. It's difficult to see a happy ending in the whole saga.
Well, let's talk about D-Day. Veterans and world leaders on Thursday gathered in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of the June 6, 1944 D-Day landings, where more than 150,000 Allied soldiers arrived in France by sea and air to drive out the forces of Nazi Germany. With war raging in Ukraine on Europe's borders, this year's commemoration of this major turning point in World War II carries special resonance. The anniversary takes place in a year of many elections, including for the European Parliament this week and in the US in November. Leaders are set to draw parallels with World War II and one of the dangers of isolationism and the far right. With the number of veterans, many aged 100 years old or more, fast dwindling, this is likely to be the last major ceremony in Normandy, honoring them in their presence. Some 200 veterans, most of them American or British, are set to take part in ceremonies throughout on windspread beaches that still bear the scars of the fighting that erupted on D-Day, history's largest amphibious invasion. Let me come back to you, Professor Aworawo.
That night 80 years ago was a turning point in the war against Nazism. It was also the most brutal battle of the entire war on the Western Front. When we are remembering the men and also some few women today, it reminds us that freedom can never be taken for granted. The Danish poet and member of the World War II resistance movement in Denmark, Martin A. Hansen, wrote these remarkable words that I will quote in Danish. Hvert liv, det koster ved Normandie, vil lade en af vore gå fri. The meaning of these words is that for every life taken in Normandy, one of ours go free. This tells something about what D-Day meant. Freedom is not free. Freedom comes with a price, and freedom is a struggle.
Well, that's the Danish Prime Minister there, commenting on the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Prof, let me start with you. You're a professor of history.
Yeah, it's interesting when we teach World War II. It's one of those major events that took place during World War II. It was a pivotal moment in the war when the U.S. decided to give extensive military support. 130,000 soldiers landing in Normandy. General Dwight Eisenhower cutting a niche for himself. The thing was very neatly carried out. They knew that Russia was, that USSR was making progress on the eastern flank, and that if they could also come strongly from the western flank, they would hem in German forces, and that would signal victory. In fact, that was the beginning of the end of the war, because things just moved on smoothly from that point till May 1945, when the Germans surrendered to General Montgomery, and then, of course, Eisenhower. And, of course, except the conflict that continued in the east, in the Pacific, when Japan continued to stubbornly fight before the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August the 6th, August the 9th, 1945, which led the war to come to an end on the 23rd of August, 1945. So it's fascinating that European leaders are still remembering and celebrating this important development in World War II. When you see what the atrocities that Hitler committed, very racist, grouping the races of the world to different levels and putting some far behind, which influenced the genocide against the Jews. The earlier the Germans were defeated in that war, the better. And D-Day was pivotal in that victory. So it's important. And of course, there are lessons to learn from it. One of which, the comments that have been made about isolationism. The world should come together to tackle global problems. That is the best way for global development to be assured. When countries, especially important countries, stay away from global politics, it is detrimental to collective peace and stability of the world. So U.S. Extensive involvement in this day is well noted. And the lesson is that countries of today will have to work together to ensure that global development, global peace and stability are ensured.
Well, Jide Ologun, one concern will be the effort to rebuild Europe after World War II, the establishment of institutions to preserve peace in the world. Even the United Nations has not worked. The challenges remain, but your view?
The iconic intervention has been reckoned with the liberation of Europe. And like Prof mentioned, it's time to come around and tame whatever will destabilize the peace. And there's a public relations angle to it, that some of the veterans that are still alive are witnessing the celebration. So it's not that they have just moved away from it. And that serves as an encouragement for those who will hold the mandate of building and rebuilding, because they will be motivated to do that. And I also studied and realized that the veterans do not appear to have been neglected, like in some countries where those who risked their lives to fight to gain freedom for the people are neglected. And I hope that the world will realize after this globalization concept that the peace of one nation is the peace of another nation, and that we must all come together to ensure that when a nation decides to set fire, we see how to quell it. And I'm also throwing our attention to the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and see how some powerful forces will also come in to ensure, like as the D-Day, they put a hold on the spreading fire, that something is also done there. Because if fire starts in your neighbor's house, you may not be able to tell how far it can go. And once again, I want to congratulate those who are still alive, and I know they'll be filled with joy and hope that the future of the world will be that of prosperity, even though many people wonder how that will come about if we don't approach it deliberately. And again, for us, as we discuss it in Africa, what lessons do we have to learn from there? How can we make our own continent better? And narrowing it down to our own country, how can we narrow it down to the fact that we become prosperous and also comply with the requirement of Section 14, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, that says that the security and the welfare of the citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. So the D-Day celebration should awaken our government to the fact that we need security in Nigeria, we need good welfare for the citizens, so that we can have a Nigeria that serves the interest, where we create commonwealth for common good. So we join them in that celebration, and we say kudos to America that has, for now, remained the police of the world. So more work for them to do.
Okay, just before we draw the curtain, let's take a local story. The Kaduna State House of Assembly this past week recommended that the immediate past governor of the state, Nasir El-Rufai, and other indicted members of his cabinet be prosecuted for alleged abuse of office and money laundering within the period he was governor. The lawmakers accused the El-Rufai administration of siphoning a total of 423 billion naira. Well, that's the situation we have in Kaduna State, and the former governor says this is scandalous, this is an attempt to witch hunt him, it's a political witch hunt, and that he served with integrity, and that he's proud of his legacy, and that after all, the people who worked with him honored the invitation and tried to defend what he did as governor of Kaduna State. Jide, let me start with you now, as we quickly wrap up.
Point blank, Nigeria is not serious about fighting corruption. That's my opinion, and I have reasons for saying that. El-Rufai is no longer enjoying immunity. So if the allegations are there, let the stakeholders, the law enforcement agencies, move in and let him come. Like Prof mentioned earlier, we have presumption of innocence. So investigate. In the criminal justice value chain, you have three important pillars: thorough investigation, diligent prosecution, and a committed judiciary. And of course, when you bring out these allegations, you must prove it beyond all reasonable doubt. So if the state is serious, what stops them from going after El-Rufai? He's no longer the governor. I mean, he's a former governor. But he is now telling them that they are jokers. But let me throw this big stick on the table, and I hope somebody will hold it to act with it. What has happened to the prima facie cases we have read about? The big scam in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviations, the stealing by Accountant General and everything. So my opinion, conclusively, is that we are still asleep in fighting corruption in Nigeria. And we need to look at the impact of corruption on the welfare of the nation and the well-being of the nation. So I leave El-Rufai to the House of Assembly and all of them who are there, and hope that this story will not also go under the carpets as others unfold.
Yeah, I will just take it from how Barrister has presented it. Thorough investigation, diligent prosecution, a judiciary that will be courageous and fair. Let it be fair. Once there is fairness, is there a social media thing that El-Rufai will write, his son will write? Those things are just rubbish. Let the lawmakers carry out investigation thoroughly. Then let there be prosecution, let it proceed from there. And if he's found guilty, fine. If he's not found guilty, for now, of course, he's presumed innocent. It's a war of one against the other now, but let the process just proceed methodically to the end. Everybody will be happy if that happens.
Well, thank you very much, Professor David Aworawo. Thank you very much, Jide Ologun. Good to have you again on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. For my entire team here in Lagos, it is bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.